Let's go to finance now. The latest OECD forecast for the eurozone, a hardly inspiring reading. The bleak report points to recession and even more danger ahead, with Greece possibly leaving the eurozone.
Jonathan Tepper from the global research company Variant Perception has studied the history of defaults and currency collapses. He spoke to Europe correspondent Philip Williams.
If Greece does go, then does that inevitably mean the breakup of the eurozone in the long term?
I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary to break up the entire euro area just because there are some countries that need to leave that shouldn't be in it. I think the bigger question is, if Greece leaves, does this then mean that other peripheral countries, let's say Portugal, Ireland or Spain, will leave? And so what people are worried about, I think, is not so much Greece, which is a very, very small part of the total euro area or even global GDP, but whether there is a contagion effect. So an analogy for looking at Asia and Australia is Thailand in 1997 was very small, and clearly if Thailand devalued, it wasn't a problem, but clearly Thailand, it's like when you see one cockroach, you see more. It had a balance of payments problem, and it was a classic emerging markets crisis, and so it wasn't just Thailand, it was Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea. So people are looking at Greece now, and it's not just Greece, they're looking at Greece, Spain, Ireland, Portugal, and obviously Italy, the biggest of them all. The question is, does the European Central Bank decide to sort of draw a line in the sand and start printing money, buying government bonds, or does this spiral out of control where you get bank runs in other peripheral countries?
Now, of course, Angela Merkel has been very against more central bank involvement. Do you think inevitably that's going to happen? The pressure is just going to be too great?
Well, I think it was Benjamin Bernanke said that there are no atheists in foxholes, and I think central bankers often don't want to take extraordinary measures, but in the middle of a crisis, they're willing to take measures that they would not have otherwise taken. Clearly, the ECB was modeled in a way after the Bundesbank. The Germans hate inflation. They lived through Weimar Germany. It's sort of embedded in their consciousness. But the Germans have to realize that they're not going to, the debts that are owed to them are not going to be paid back in real terms. So either it will be via default process where they won't be paid back, or they'll have to accept some higher degree of inflation that will help ease the debt burden in the periphery. But one of two ways they're not going to be paid back. The Germans simply need to figure out which one they want to accept.
Is there a soft landing possible with all of this crisis?
Not really. I think that the euro is a very flawed design, and so basically there will always be an inappropriate monetary policy for one country or another. And I think that even if the ECB decides to print money, clearly that will create other problems. Now, arguably these other problems might be preferable to the current set of problems, but I think that there's no easy policy. I mean, to explain it to sort of the Australian public, the periphery, for example, Spain has a housing bubble. The U.S. had a housing bubble. The UK has one. Australia arguably currently has one. But like, what happens in Australia? This RBA cuts rates, and the currency devalues by 30 to 40%. Now, this happens every sort of 8 or 9 years, and that's a huge adjustment mechanism. It does not exist for the periphery. So they're essentially like trapped in this house on fire where they don't control their own monetary policy or have a currency that they can devalue.
And where's the fire brigade?
Well, the ECB, but unfortunately they can't do what the Bank of England's doing, quantitative easing, what the U.S. is doing, or what the Bank of Japan did in its day. The Bank of Japan's actually done very little recently, but clearly the ECB, if they wanted to, could cap government bond yields, make financing easier. But it's very difficult. It will probably require some political decision by European policymakers and the ECB. But I suspect if the crisis is bad enough, they can go out and buy government bonds and not say they're doing it to finance government debt, but rather to sort of restore the proper functioning of credit markets.